I've got a question for you to think about. So at the end of Zoom training and face-to-face training, one of the questions that practitioners answer in their evaluation of the training is this. They're asked, in an overall sense, how satisfied were you with this training? So they're asked that question, whether it's Zoom training or face-to-face training. So my question to you is this. Since we've started Zoom training, which is 2 years, do you think that practitioners answer to that question, or are they more satisfied with Zoom training than face-to-face training? Are they perhaps less satisfied with Zoom training or face-to-face training? Or do you think it's maybe somewhere near the same? Have a think about that, whether you think they're more, less, or about the same in terms of satisfaction with training. Right? Don't need to answer me as such, just have a think. So you might be surprised to know, or not surprised to know, that the satisfaction rating comparing Zoom to face-to-face training is somewhat similar. So it's sort of the same. So which was a surprise to me. If we look at this particular data comparison of in-person versus Zoom training just around that question, the mean overall satisfaction rating in 2020 when we started Zoom training. So on a 7-point scale, the dark blue there is the face-to-face mean, and the light blue there is the Zoom mean. As you can see, it's somewhat similar. And if we were to look at accreditation as well, a comparison of in-person versus Zoom accreditation, that overall mean, and think about what you notice there, it's pretty similar as well. So when I saw this data, because I had in my own mind what I thought was happening, but I saw in this data, I thought, well, why could that be? And I thought, well, surely practitioners would rate Zoom less satisfying, or surely they would feel more negative about training on Zoom. And I thought, surely that it'd be a more unpleasant experience being on Zoom. So what I want to talk to you about today is in this 30 odd minutes is what I've discovered perhaps that might answer that question. And I'm also going to think about what are some ideas we can think about for the future. So just those two things, what I've discovered that might answer that question as to why it's the same, the evaluations are somewhat the same, and what are some things we can think about as we move forward with Zoom as well. So in terms of why practitioners might even think about starting a Zoom training on Triple P, why would they even be keen about that? I think there's some practical reasons as to why they might even decide, yeah, I think I'll have a go at this training on Zoom. They can do the training from home. So they can put the washing on and sit in front of the training, and then at a break, they can go and take the washing out, or they can go and make their own snack in the kitchen, or they can go and perhaps even attend to children, which I've seen happen as well. So it's a very comfortable experience for practitioners often to be online. So it's quite motivating, and it's quite an advantage to be at home perhaps. So they can do that quite easily. So that's an advantage as to why they might be okay to start a training. The fact that it's cheaper. Think about agencies. They don't have to pay any money for airfares. They don't have to pay any money for accommodation. And when practitioners travel away to a training and do it face-to-face, there's usually a day prior to the training they've got to travel. There's a day after the training they've got to travel as well. So there's opportunities that the agency doesn't have for that practitioner to work as well. So it's significantly cheaper. That's a great motivator in terms of choosing to do Zoom training compared to face-to-face. It's much cheaper. If you think about, you can do it from anywhere. I haven't had anyone yet do it from the beach, but if you think about where you could do it, you can do it from anywhere. I had this practitioner last year in a group training, it's a 3-day training, and in the afternoon session, she came and told me that she's just been admitted to hospital. And we talked about what she was going to do, and she said, no, I want to keep doing this training. So she was admitted to hospital, and here she was lying in her hospital bed. She'd logged in on her phone, holding up her phone, logged into the training. And I suppose that's a really an example of the fact that you can do this training from anywhere. Because if that was a face-to-face training, that practitioner at that point just would have had to miss out on that part of the training. So I think that's a real feature of perhaps why practitioners are okay to start a Zoom training in the first instance. And the last thing I'll talk about as to why they're okay to start it is the fact that we're used to it now. Like all of you just logged on instantly and there's no drama at all. So we're used to, this is how our life now works, unfortunately. However, and I've also found that there's language that's now embedded in my conversation with people. I say things like this: I Zoomed them yesterday, or oh, I got Zoom fatigue, or things like I'll send them a Zoom link, or I was just Zooming them last week. So this language is just embedded in our conversation now. So Zoom has become part of our existence. That person doesn't know much about Zoom etiquette. I'm sure you all know about Zoom etiquette. Or I haven't got the Zoom link for that meeting yet. And my favourite, do you want to know my favourite? My favourite is this: I've got Zoomitis, which is something I suffer from quite often when you're doing Zoom training. I'm guessing you probably experience that too, no doubt. So there's this general acceptance, I think, of Zoom being just part of our working existence now. And you probably expect it as well. You expect when there is a training going on, when there is a meeting going on, that Zoom is how we'll do it. We don't have to use Zoom as our platform. I'm sure you use other platforms as well. I'm just using Zoom as an example. But what I find really intriguing as well, even though I think practitioners have accepted it, this is a comment that I see really commonly in evaluation forms. Practitioners say this: I would have preferred to have done the training face-to-face. So even though they're accepting of Zoom as a part of the process, they still are thinking, I prefer to do this face-to-face. And you know what I'd prefer to do? Face-to-face as well. So that's perhaps the reason why practitioners might choose to do Zoom, or some reason. You probably have lots of that you could think of as well. But in terms of us trying to answer that question as to why they might, practitioners might evaluate face-to-face being somewhat similar to Zoom, I think there's some functional reasons as well as to why they're okay with it. And the functional reasons are things perhaps like this: we can show videos, just like we do face-to-face. I show the exact same videos at the exact same time. So we can do that exactly the same as face-to-face. And we can do group activities. I can put people in breakout rooms as in pairs, in threes, in fours. We can do that quite functionally. So that's something we do in face-to-face. We can do it in Zoom. And as you will all be aware of, we can go and visit groups. I can go and check in on to see how they're going. Do they need any assistance? Just like I would face-to-face. So these are very functional things that have transferred quite easily to Zoom. We can do demonstrations. I can demonstrate something like ask, say, do, or I could demonstrate directed discussion, just like I would face-to-face online. And we can do behaviour rehearsal. I could demonstrate the whole start routine online. And then I could also get practitioners, put them into threes, and they could practice the entire start routine online. It looks different and it feels a bit more cumbersome, but we can do it. So there's that functional component of Zoom as well. And then, of course, we can do accreditation, just like we do face-to-face. And practitioners are really accepting of it, strangely. Even though it is a bit more cumbersome and a bit harder work, we still can do it. So as I think about that why question, I think, well, there's some practical reasons as to why practitioners are okay to start a Zoom training, because we're just used to it and we accept it. But then there's also those functional components, I think, of Zoom that we're able to do Triple P training online just like we would face-to-face. So I think that sort of, for me, explains perhaps why practitioners might perhaps give it a similar score to face-to-face, even though there's lots of other dynamics that influence that, particularly in terms of what the trainer's like. That sort of makes a big difference as well. So that might, so if Zoom is acceptable to practitioners, where might we be going in the future with Triple P training? I'm not sure, but my best hope is that we have this sort of hybrid existence where we have Zoom plus face-to-face, where agencies perhaps, or even practitioners, have a choice, possibly, I would hope for. A couple of weeks ago, I presented a seminar, and I presented a seminar face-to-face. Can you imagine that? Face-to-face in a school. And it was just such this lovely experience, because I really appreciated the natural audience reaction that you get when you're face to face. It's just the loveliest thing. And I really valued it. And prior to that, I'd do lots of seminar presentations, and I wouldn't necessarily value it as such. But now it really jumped out at me, the value of that. So I think it's very important, I think, that we do have this hybrid existence where we don't lose the importance of face to face. So what I want to share with you is 7 things, and there's lots more of them I could have included, but there's 7 things that I think perhaps could enhance what we're already doing. Because we've sort of tried to force a face-to-face training into a online training. It isn't necessarily fit for purpose, but it's working, clearly. So, but are there some things we perhaps can consider that perhaps could make a difference? I'd be keen to know what you think about these ideas as well. This idea here comes from the ultimate guide, how to effectively shift to online learning, the ultimate guide. It's from a group called TechSmith. You might know them. Anyway, they said this: when students relate to online instructors as something more than a subject matter expert, they're more likely to be motivated, satisfied, and succeed. So I thought they were thinking about things like the personal interaction, the relationship building that a practitioner does with a group. So we're not just presenting you expert information, we're presenting a relationship that I build with you across the 3 days or whatever it might be. So as we think about face-to-face training, that's not, I wouldn't say easy, but that's a much more natural thing to do. But as we think about that important point about being online, how do we build relationship? How do we start relationship with our group when we start training them? So a couple of things that I think perhaps can make a difference, and some things that perhaps I've started as well in terms of starting to build relationship. Before a training, I get what's called an EB. You might be aware of those, what they are, an electronic bundle, and it has the names of everybody on it, and they're all email addresses and lots of other things, of course. So I have all their email addresses. So 3 days or 2 days before the training, I would send out an email to them introducing myself and reminding them of the times for the training, reminding them about it's important to be online on your own computer, maybe telling them briefly about myself, and just welcoming them and saying I'm looking forward to seeing them at the particular starting date. So I'm introducing myself in a very brief sense prior to the training. So I think that starts that relationship building process, which I think now I've discovered is really important. And often practitioners write something back. They write something nice back to say, yes, I'm looking forward to starting the training. And I think that starts the relationship building. But now I'm thinking this. I'm thinking, well, maybe I could do that as a video. Maybe I could record a 90-second video or a 60-second video with the same content and send that out to them. And now they get to see this person who's going to be training them. And I think that might be a really good way of introducing myself in an online environment before the training starts. So I haven't done that, by the way, but I'm thinking, like as I was reading about this, I think that might be a really useful tool to use to build that relationship. Plus, if we think about how to start a Zoom training, how in the world do you start a group of people to take them through 3 days when you're online? So there's lots of things that happen at the beginning, but one thing that happens at the beginning is some sort of get to know you task. And it's got to be online, of course. So what I've been doing is things like putting practitioners into pairs. This is only the get to know you task. And I just asked them to think about 2 things. Can you just share with your partner where you work and what job you do, and can see if you can talk to them and come up with something you have in common. So it creates a discussion. And then after 4 minutes, then I put that pair with another pair, and they sort of do the same thing. And at the same time, like I would if we were face-to-face, I could go around to each of those groups. I can go and visit those groups and share a little bit about me and get to hear a little bit about them. Not everybody, which we couldn't probably do when we were face-to-face either, but I think that starts that beginning relationship process as well. Plus, when we share personal examples, I think we make it more realistic for practitioners as well. We're not just presenting this information from the Triple P program even though this is the same face-to-face, of course, but I think it's more important when we're online that we share practical examples of when we've seen parents use consequences, or when we've seen parents use say do, or any of the other strategies that we might be introducing to parents. I think those personal examples, of course, it's important not to do it all the time, but where we see an opportunity, I think that's important in terms of the relationship building. So we become a real person. And then the other thing I thought of as well is that in this space is the fact that we use the self-regulatory model. So we're not really presenting ourselves, I suppose, as an expert. We want to teach that self-regulatory idea. So when our practitioners ask questions and we respond with we respond with acknowledge, clarify, prompt, we're actually teaching them to think for themselves as well. And I think, therefore, we're building relationship when we do that as well. So I think that's an important feature to think about as we move forward. How do we build relationship with online people? Now, this is a pretty crucial feature, I think, if some think about in terms of where we're heading with online training. For example, if a practitioner has to sit through 4 days of training, that's a big job. So fatigue is a significant issue. It's probably the most challenging issue for us as trainers, and perhaps for you, the work you do online with students as well. So how we present slides, I think, is really crucial. So if you're doing a teen triple P group training and practitioners are there for 3 days and are exposed to 220 something slides across 3 days, that can be incredibly enduring. So as we think about that, I think how we present the slides is worth thinking about. For example, if you were presented with 220 slides across 3 days and they look like this, and the glare that's now got into your eyes that I can even see reflected from the screens, I can see it in your eyes, that white glare that you're now experiencing, I think is very significant for our practitioners. And it really, I think, wears people out. If we were able to think about what's the difference between when you see that glare and you picture yourself going through 220 slides of that and you change from this to this. Can you feel your eyes relax? Can you feel your eyes not have that sense of glare that I think is very enduring? So just try that again. Think to yourself, here's the glare. Picture 220 slides of glare, even though you're not watching slides all the time. And picture what difference it possibly could make if we went from that level of glare and picture what it's like for you, or experience what it's like for you when you change to this. Can you feel your face relax when that happens? So I think it's worth thinking about that we could think about what dark backgrounds could look like. And they don't have to be black, but I think they have to be in some way take away that glare that has a chance of creating less stress, I think, for practitioners as they are exposed to a lot of slides. The training structure, I think, can make it a difference as well. So think about this question. What difference do you think it would make to fatigue if we presented a 2-day primary care training across 4 half days? I wonder what that'd be like for practitioners. So they come along for a half a day, then the rest of the day can go off and do the rest of their work. And they come for the next day, they go off and do the rest of their work, and so on across 4 days. I wonder what difference that could make to the stress and the fatigue level for practitioners, their ability to take on board the information. We have tried that, and I know around the world they have tried that as well. My experience has been it's been quite successful, and practitioners have reported to me that they like the idea of being able to receive the training, then also go on with their work in the afternoon as well, so they don't necessarily get behind, has been what they've reported. So that, I think, is something for us to perhaps think about as well. Plus, the other feature that we've trialled also is if you imagine doing a 4-day group Indigenous training, and what would it be like if we structured it like this? We had the first 2 days of training were Thursday, Friday. We had a weekend, and then the practitioners came back and did Monday, Tuesday. So in terms of reducing fatigue, we're breaking it up by having a weekend in between. So I think that could be something that's worth considering as well. And all the other variations as we stay online that might be useful for particular agencies and practitioners. Even our slide structure could make a difference. I'm not too sure whether you might have moved yourselves around, but I think it's really useful for us when we show PowerPoints, or if we show, if we have a picture in some way, that we have an audience block, or what I might call an audience block. So you'll notice, I'm guessing, unless you've moved yourself, I'm guessing you might be sitting in, and your faces might be sitting in that grey rectangle at the right-hand side. So for me, that gives us a sense that we have a place where the audience sits. When we're showing a slide, this is where the audience could sit, even though I can't see all of you, because we can't necessarily do that on Zoom unless we go back to gallery view. But I think that's a useful thing. Just like you'd have the audience sitting in chairs, when we show a slide, we could also place the audience in that block, even though I know you can move yourself around as well. I think that's a useful tool to use as well. Are you comfortable sitting in your seats where you are? In the grey square? So this is something, not so much with Triple P, but I've been trialing this idea with other things that I've been doing as well. Not with training as such, but I think it's something that's worthwhile us thinking about, to have a slide structure that's useful for us. And it's a routine that the practitioners can get into as well. But what's really crucial, I think, is when we are showing slides and you are in your place to sit in the grey square, I think it's really important to rotate back to gallery view really quickly, because what I can see happen, it's very easy as a trainer as well to leave a slide up there and just keep talking. So I think it's important to rotate back to gallery view where everybody's across the screen and now we're talking. And if we go back to a slide, we go back to the slide and then you're in your grey square again. And then when we talk again, we go back to the gallery view again. Because what I think then that has a chance of reducing fatigue as well, because the practitioners aren't exposed to that constant glare of a slide. So we just use slides as we need them and then move back out of it. And then as we're talking again, we're back to gallery view. I think that's really helpful. And I've discovered I do that now quite naturally, whereas I move back and forward from gallery view to sharing, not quickly, but I try not to leave slides just sitting there. If we're face-to-face, of course, that's what happens. The slide just stays there and we just keep moving it on. But when we're online, I think we've got to try and lessen that intensity of constantly having a slide sitting in front of people. This would be helpful, hey? Having brain breaks. So there's two things here that I wanted to think about. And of course, this is to do with fatigue as well. So if you think about the number of slides that we often have in training, everybody, including me, are at risk of death by PowerPoint. So it's something we carry around with us all the time when we have so many training slides. So brain breaks become really important. And what we've built into training, which I've found is really helpful, and practitioners clearly report is really helpful for them, is every hour we have a 5-minute break. So we have our normal breaks at 10:30, 12:45, 2:45, 12:30, 2:45, and then finish at 4:30. But every hour, we actually ask practitioners just to turn off their screens and their microphone and walk away. They don't have to walk away, but just have a break from the screen. And we've found that to be really successful and it only has to be 5 minutes. The strange part about that, by the end of a 3-day training, 5 minutes is incredibly fast. It speeds up as you go through a 3-day training, something that I've discovered. The other thing that I've found really helpful is the fact that we ask practitioners, if they want to not to feel like they've got to keep looking at the screen. So at the moment, you're just looking at me while I'm presenting, maybe. And so when you've got a 3-day training, I think it's useful to encourage practitioners when they feel like it to look away and not feel like you've got to literally be watching that screen constantly. If you was in a regular presentation, face-to-face, you don't necessarily always look at the person. You do look away, you might look out the window briefly and look back. Your gaze does wander. But when we're online, I think we have this sense of feeling like we've got to keep watching the whole time. So I've found it useful to give practitioners, just permission is probably not the right word, but to point out to them, it can be quite helpful for us when we're on a long training to be okay to look away, but still be able to tune in. So that gives us, I think, a bit of a brain break. So the use of video, I discovered this piece of information that really aligned with what we already do in Triple P. This is a group, I think it's on the next slide. This group, I can't even read the slide very well. There's Gao, Ruben, and Kim and co. They've suggested that in this online training that what's really useful around using videos is short 15-minute videos. And I thought to myself, well, that's what we do. We use short 15-minute, or not 15 minutes, but brief videos with training. And we use videos that, this is what they've suggested in their research, that's it includes talking in the videos. We do that as well. But the feature I thought that this group mentioned in their research was that our videos perhaps need to have a more personal feel. They thought that was important. And I sort of feel like that is important. By that personal feel, it means real videos of real families. And I've discovered this when I'm doing a training face-to-face or online. If I show a little piece of video of something from Driving Mum and Dad Mad, or some video that I have realistic video of a family, everybody's ears prick up. Everybody tunes in when it's a real family. So I thought to myself, well, this is something perhaps as we move forward, we could really embellish our training by, if we can. I know it's incredibly challenging to get that sort of video, but to be aware of the fact that when we do include that real video, I think it makes a difference. And when we're online in a challenging environment where it's very fatiguing, to have anything like that that motivates the learners, I think can be really helpful. And there are some, I often use, Rio and her mum. There's a lovely example of Rio and her mum using a planned activities routine. Mum always wants, those of you may not know Rio, but he's a very challenging little man. And mum eventually takes him on an outing to go to a restaurant and does it quite successfully. And mum's this fantastic mum who thinks aloud and talks about what she's doing while she's taking Rio, who is very challenging, on this outing to a restaurant, an outsider restaurant. And everybody's ears prick up when they see that mum. And I'm able to help the practitioners think about what that mum did and how that mum managed it. So some of you may not know Rio, but having that realistic example really brings home the value of a planned activities routine. So I'm thinking that if we can, as we move forward, think about how we can include more realistic examples. I think that would really enhance our online training. So there's evidence to suggest that having quizzes is a really useful tool. And this is something that I do now, I've been doing this for quite some time, is to include quizzes. And it's not so much a quiz to test people, it's a quiz to help them review what we've done. For example, on the second day of a training, we would start the day with a quiz. So when we're online, I would put our group in pairs, so everybody's in a pair, and I've got 10 questions about what we did the day before. So I then tell them the first question, and I send them off in their pairs. They talk about it. They talk about that particular question. Then I type the question in and send it as a message to every pair. There's the next question. They talk about that. So we'd go through the 10 questions. And I find that really useful. And when they come back, I check in with them. Is there any questions you really struggled with or anything you're concerned about? And I found it a really useful way to review and to consolidate in their own minds what we've done so far. And of course, now I do it at the beginning of a day and also after lunch break, because it's quite an energizing experience, because practitioners don't see it as a test. They just see it as a chance to think about what we've done so far. So it can be really helpful. So I think it helps practitioners stay focused. If they know we have these little quizzes, it helps them absorb, I think, the information perhaps a bit better as well, because they're now not only just experiencing it, now they're talking about it with their partner. I think that helps them absorb it. Plus, when we check in with them, when they come back and we check in with them, anything they really struggle with or they don't quite understand, we can check their understanding as well when they do that also. So I find quizzes really useful, even though I don't present it as if it's a test in any way, but it's just a quiz, for want of a better word. I suppose it explains what it is we're trying to do. So the sort of things that I've talked about today, I've talked about the fact that it appears that online training and compared to face-to-face training is reasonably satisfying for practitioners. They're sort of okay with it. And we talked about the fact that there are some practical reasons as to why practitioners might be okay to start a training. And we just introduced the idea of the functional reasons as to why what we can do online with Triple P training is pretty similar to what we can do face-to-face. We've talked about that. And now we've just considered these 7 considerations of things that I've thought about, and there could be a lot more, that perhaps could enhance online training as we move forward. But I know this. I know that quizzes really help us understand what we do with anything that's presented to us. So I'm going to give you a quiz. Here it is. Here's the first question. Compared to face-to-face training, how satisfied are practitioners about Zoom training online? That's a tough one. Okay, I'm sure you've all got that. Here's the second one. You'll never get this one. One of the reasons that practitioners might be okay to start a Zoom training is that it is, I'll just read that again. One of the reasons that practitioners might be okay to start a Zoom training is that it is, I hope there's nobody struggling with that one. So yeah, it's cheaper. That's a pretty good motivating reason. Here's the next one. What's one thing we could do to begin the process of personal interaction or relationship building with our group when training online? What's one thing perhaps we could do to begin that relationship building process? How'd you go? Pretty good? All right, a couple more. What's one change we could make with our slides that may assist with fatigue? What's one change we can make with our slides that could assist with fatigue? Did you get it? Okay. All right, 2 to go. What's another thing we could do to help with fatigue? What's another thing perhaps we could do to help with fatigue? How did you go? That might have been a challenge, that one. Okay, here's the last one. Regular quizzes might help practitioners to do what? Regular quizzes might help practitioners to do what? That's too easy. Thanks, everybody.